Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Despite tough sanctions from Washington that basically aimed to end China's tech development, the world was shocked last August when Huawei released a new phone, the Mate 60 Pro, which featured an advanced chip that was considered a breakthrough for China's semiconductor industry and a massive win for Huawei, a win that came years ahead of US expectations. So you'd think that Washington would learn from its mistakes and come up with a new tactic, one that didn't force China to develop on a path that will most definitely see US firms sidelined. Well, they haven't. This week, Washington placed further sanctions on the supply of chips to Huawei. The US is literally signing its own death certificate. Today, we'll chat with Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology to get the details. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. In late 2020, Huawei was fighting for its survival as a mobile phone maker. A few months earlier, the Trump administration had hit the Chinese company with crippling sanctions, cutting it off from global semiconductor supply chains. Yet nearly 3 years later, in August 2023, a new Huawei device was quietly unveiled to the public, the Mate 60 series phone. The Mate 60 flew off the shelves in China, and the return of Huawei chips following years of sanctions was enthusiastically applauded by nationalists and tech fans. In the US, confusion reigned about how Huawei had overcome sanctions to produce the chips. Jake Sullivan, US National Security Advisor, said that America needed to get more information about the Kirin 9000s. That is a pretty accurate account from the Financial Times about how Huawei's massive David and Goliath win against Washington's attempts to kill the company shocked China hawks and the world alike. You would think then that those same anti-China, anti-fair competition hawks on Capitol Hill would quietly retreat with their tails between their legs, having learned an important lesson. China is willing to support US and other international tech companies and work in collaboration. But if you place the Middle Kingdom between a rock and a hard place, it will innovate, it will succeed, and it will leave you in the dust. That's why the next big shock came on May 7, when Western media announced that Washington had introduced new, similarly suicidal measures against Huawei, revoking the export licenses for Intel and Qualcomm. This according to Reuters. The US has revoked licenses that allowed companies, including Intel and Qualcomm, to ship chips used for laptops and handsets to sanctioned Chinese telecoms equipment maker Huawei Technologies, 3 people familiar with the matter said. The article continues, "This action will bolster US national security, protect American ingenuity, and diminish Communist China's ability to advance its technology," Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik said in a statement. Well, I'm sorry, Elise, but you couldn't be more wrong. In fact, just last month, Huawei released another new phone, the Pura 70 Pro, which Reuters has just announced is another nail in the coffin for Washington. Reuters sent one off for inspection and just released this article titled, "Exclusive, Huawei's new phone uses more China-made parts, memory chip," which reads, "Huawei's latest high-end phone features more Chinese suppliers, including a new flash memory storage chip and an improved chip processor," a teardown analysis showed, pointing to the progress China is making towards technology self-sufficiency. And that is exactly what is happening. China is being forced to be self-sufficient, which absolutely did not need to happen. US companies like Intel and Qualcomm, for example, previously made the bulk of their income in the billions of US dollars from China. And now that will all end, something China was in no rush to do. Back to the Reuters analysis of the new Huawei phone. The firms also found that the Pura 70 phones run on an advanced processing chipset made by Huawei. While we cannot provide an exact percentage, we'd say the domestic component usage is high, and definitely higher than in the Mate 60, said Shahram Mokhtari, iFixit's lead teardown technician. This is about self-sufficiency. All this is, everything you see when you open up a smartphone, and see whatever are made by Chinese manufacturers. This is all about self-sufficiency, Mokhtari said. So why and how is Washington getting it so wrong? Why are they so hell-bent on crippling Chinese tech development that they're willing to undertake such idiotic kamikaze moves? Well, to find out more, we're joined again by Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology. Warwick, welcome back to Reports on China. First up, a really simple question. Why has Washington not learned its lesson from last time, namely that sanctioning these Chinese tech companies is hurting the US way more than anyone else?
I think it's becoming increasingly clear that the motivations are well beyond what you'd normally call rational. The original intention was to create high fence around a small yard, focused around ostensibly the issues of national security. But the reactions to Huawei's last phone and the most latest phone seems to be quite emotionally driven, if you will, which speaks to, I think, a political reaction that is a long, long way away from some of the original rhetoric. It's hard to explain exactly why it is that you would continue doing things that cause yourself so much harm whilst achieving so little of your original objectives. But there you have it.
Yeah, I think for me it seems pretty clear. Like you said, it's pretty irrational. There's a lot of emotion and rash decisions involved. But I was wondering if you feel maybe there's also perhaps an ideological struggle going on.
In some ways, Andy, there's a long sweep of history unfolding before our very eyes. And that sweep of history really is an unfinished spiritual war that began a couple of hundred years ago when the American evangelists sought to save the souls of the Chinese, the barbarians from the Orient, and having failed to do so, then proceeded to engage in war with them. And for the last 20 or so years, there was again an attempt to save the great other, the Chinese, and that probably as a project came to an end around or at least in a realization sense, around 2016, 2018 period, when the blob in Washington, so to speak, came to, in some senses, regret the previous 20 or so years of engagement and have now flipped from trying to save the souls of the Chinese by integrating them into global capitalism, American style, to now having to vanquish the Chinese as the uncivilized other.
Interesting. Hey, we've seen Huawei release a new phone, the Pura 70 Pro, as well as their very first AI laptop. So clearly, Washington's moves to slow down China's tech development aren't working. So how do you see Chinese tech moving forward in the near future, and what impact do you think that would have on US firms like Intel and Qualcomm, for example?
Look, the sanctions have given rise to the kind of reactions that many in the industry actually expected. You know, what doesn't kill you will only make you stronger, and enterprises and countries will understandably respond to an environment where they're being cut off from particular technologies and goods and services. And the Chinese ecosystem has responded with a gusto. The paradox with the attempts to ban Huawei or cut Huawei off from a whole range of technologies is that Huawei has actually begun to play a pivotal role in two main parts. One is in its role as a key developer and anchor within an overall ecosystem within China, which has made it possible for a range of startup firms to get a leg up and for firms to get sufficient volume of sales to really kickstart their big investment activities in some of these new tech spaces. And the other dimension is that Huawei is also fundamentally changing the business model with its commitment to a whole range of open source platforms, which will begin to change the ways in which technology works commercially across the world. Neither of these transformations are actually any good for businesses in the traditional space. Loss of market access to the Chinese marketplace will damage the revenues of a number of the more traditional suppliers. I don't know why this policy is being pursued if your interest is actually around developing American enterprise. But I guess that's the whole point of this irrationality, is that it's got nothing to do with developing industry and a hell of a lot more to do with seeking to harm others.
Yeah. Hey, I asked you last time, but I want to ask you again. What advice would you give to the China hawks on Capitol Hill if you had their undivided attention?
I would say stop being hawks in relation to China and start becoming bulls in relation to America. America has many decades of talent built up and capability and experience. Focus on building and rebuilding an economy and a social fabric that enables entrepreneurship to innovate and create new products that are valuable and useful to the world. That's the first point. The second point is to simply say, become a responsible member of the global human community and find ways to participate in the construction of a shared future for humanity on the same planet that we all occupy. Simple as that.
Warwick Powell, thank you so much for your insight today.
A pleasure.
Now, recently I asked you guys if you were surprised about Washington's new round of sanctions on the Reports on China YouTube page. After nearly 3,000 votes, the vast majority of you, 89%, said you were not surprised at all and agreed that the US is making its own coffin. Yaoliang1580 wrote, "It shows the desperation of a fast declining empire." Lachlan Cross added, LOL, genius economic policy. Thanks for your comments, guys. So what do you think? Do let me know down below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.